congratulations on the premiere of the film and the great reception that it received on that night. Yeah, take me back to first reading the novel and the impact that had on you, and which of course led you to making the film.
Yeah, I received the novel on Swift Horses from my agent during lockdown, and he knows how particular I am. And he teased me when he sent it with a note, and he said, "I think you're really going to like this one." And I did. As I read Shannon's novel, it felt uh, like something completely new, but it felt completely familiar at the same time. As she was describing experiences that were so unique that I hadn't seen dramatized before. Um, it's a very internal novel, and and very cinematic in her descriptions, and also seems to draw a lot on a history of queer literature. There are aspects that were giving me the feeling of Giovanni's Room, of The City and the Pillar, of The Price of Salt. There were a lot of feelings that were flowing in a really interesting way. It wasn't an homage, it wasn't a quotation. There was just something, and maybe that's just the truth of the experience. But I was really excited by it, and called my producing partner, who we've been looking for something to do. We were sending books back and forth, and I said, "This is incredible." He said, "I just read that," and his name is Peter Spears. He produced Call Me by Your Name, and he said, "I just read that," and I thought the same thing. Let's go after it. And he arranged for us to meet Shannon, who's Shannon Pufahl is like the loveliest person. It was her first novel, and convinced her to allow us to adapt it.
Yeah, you mentioned that it was quite internal. I haven't read the book, but I imagine it's focusing on the inner lives of the characters. So, in working with your screenwriter, how did you want to translate that for film so that so we hear them speak?
The challenge of adapting this was that Bryce Cass, the screenwriter, and I needed to really give them voices and find ways to contain this very impressionistic, very beautiful, internalized novel that had a lot of memory in it, and make it move forward and be active. And I, that was the main thing. We kind of, in a way, you go after your favorite scenes in a piece of literature, but you also go after the things that you think will really dramatize the character's desires. And that's how we went about it. And of course, there's like all these incredible set pieces from the novel, like taking Henry taking Julius to watch the atomic blast, in the desert, and I mean, like, the most romantic first date ever. And these trips to the track, and these journeys through cruising parks, and the queer recreating a queer bar and a house party of all women. These were really rich things that I haven't seen dramatized, and I really wanted to go for it.
Yeah, I found those scenes really moving. And we should talk about the notice board too that we see at the queer hotel in San Diego. And we talked about maybe what you wanted to get across with that, and also the presumably their archive images that are included. Are they some real images? Yeah.
Yeah, the dead letter board is what it's called in the novel, is actually an invention of Shannon Pufahl, the author. I mean, certainly we've all seen posting boards in bars and even in queer spaces of people can find each other, or find a party, or find a trainer, This was something different, because we leaned into the epistolary aspect of the story of Muriel and Julius writing to each other, um, trying to find each other and encouraging each other and expressing their feelings. It seemed like the board was really the perfect culmination of all of that, and we go in small and see the detail of like missing since, April 1954, you know, Tommy, where are you? People trying to find each other. And then when Julius recognizes his own name and takes down the note from Muriel and Henry, we go wide and you see that there's hundreds of people looking for each other. And I think it's just a beautiful way to show how queer people always find each other, even in the most repressed, uh, environments.
Yeah, and with the party scene and the hotel scene, I think it's a great reminder that we might have been undercover as queer people, but we were still like finding each other. As you say, could you talk a little bit more about those scenes because they're really beautiful? I think.
Yeah, I was having breakfast yesterday with Shannon Pufahl. We were just kind of doing a postmortem of the whole weekend in Toronto, and really started talking about, I asked her, what was it like watching, you know, your novel being adapted like this? And we talked about that. And one of the things that we kind of came upon was just this idea that how creativity and connection and just can bring people together in the most repressive societies. I mean, I think of New York in the 70s, which is in complete chaos and economic decline, and it's there's like the richest art, in its history created then. And I think it's that kind of thing. I mean, these people are it's a film about desire, and these people are really pursuing their authentic selves, but it's a very dangerous thing. I mean, when your desires are criminalized. So, uh, I think like it causes people to be really inventive, and also, and I'm not romanticizing it in any way, but I think there's a lot of it. Being an outsider, I kind of grew up like an outsider, so I relate to that, and yeah, I think it's a important aspect of this story.
And what were your references when it came to the look of the film? There's beautiful period detail, but it's never distracting. It just sort of places us in the era. So you might want to mention the costumes, the cinematography, and things like
Yeah,
about the look of the.
because the film deals with a lot of tropes, like there's this hard-boiled dialogue that sounds like film noir, and it has aspects of the melodrama, and it has tropes of the western even, and the gambling movie. It has like a lot of familiar tropes, and we tried to subvert all of them and make it more relatable and more mundane almost. So, one of the things that Luc Montpellier, the cinematographer, and I decided very early on was we weren't going to reference 1950s films. We didn't want it to look like a pastiche of a 50s film. We wanted it to be very accessible. And all of our decisions that were made about how we photographed it and blocked things and choreographed them would come out of with the singularity of expressing the emotion. Uh, so that was a big guiding principle. And rather than watching movies, we looked at documentary photography. People like Bruce Davidson from that period, and Vivian Maier, and Gordon Parks, and paintings from the period. And we tried to get a sense of, just how things really looked. And I was always encouraging people towards randomness, the randomness in the frame for the camera operators, the full range of color for Aaron McGill, our production designer, and wanted to avoid like a controlled palette, and wanted to have avoid um, mid-century, architecture and things, except in the casino and, Las Vegas, which was all new, which would have looked like that, but to make it more surprising. And our costume designer is like this trusted collaborator of mine. I did Halston with her, Jeriana Sanwan, and she really managed to give us authentic silhouettes and leaned into the dress codes of that time period, but made them really flattering on our actors. I mean, our actors are already extremely attractive, but she managed to uh, make it accessible.
Yeah, and you mentioned the actors. We must just speak about them because the casting is obviously always really important, but it does feel particularly important in this film. And I guess rather than the actual why you chose them casting, but just in terms of the pairings and putting these actors together, what excited you when you did that, and maybe any guidance you might have had for them for the tone of the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky to get these really accomplished young actors into the film, and I feel like they're really cast for their strengths. And Daisy's work on Normal People was, it was like a new benchmark of performance and what she was able to create there. And that really suited Muriel, who's an outsider and watching and imitating. And Jacob has this kind of unknowable, kind of mysterious swagger, but he also has a swagger when he turns it on that is absolutely undeniable, and charismatic. And so that really leaned into Julius's, really that really Julius was really, he was really cast to his strengths. Will Poulter as Lee is just, I think it's a really remarkable, unusual character. And Will gave that character so much dignity and made him so sympathetic without being, kind of uh, cuckolded. And then Diego is, maybe one of the most soulful, authentic people I know. And he really, you could use every frame of what you shoot with him. He's just a natural. And, it wasn't hard to imagine him as like the best bad boyfriend you ever had. And he had great chemistry with Jacob. And then Sasha, it was so perfectly cast as Sandra because she's self-possessed and strong and has a vulnerability about her that really, she really brought something beautiful to that character. Especially, you have to believe that she's a woman who lives on her own. And that's a big attraction for Muriel. The first thing she says is, "So you live here on your own?" And then another time she says, "So you're not afraid of being alone?" You know, uh, she's like a model, sort of a model for Muriel. And then the biggest kind of connection we have is between Muriel and Julius, and it's the most complex because, it's sort of a kind of love that transcends convention and even sexuality. It's like these two queer people who are allies and who are almost like parallel, mirroring each other and change the course of each other's lives. And it really that I really owe a lot of that to the skill of these actors who were able to trust the story, but also found ways of giving these people an interior lives that really suggested they were thinking of each other, and there was a lot going on. So yeah, that's how I feel about the cast, and that's how we kind of created this ensemble.
Ask you was something that you mentioned on stage at TIFF at the premiere was the film as kind of a reimagining of the American dream, but sort of a queer lens or a queer reimagining. And I'd love you to just expand on that a little bit because I love that description.
Yeah, what we have are two characters who are both outsiders for obvious reasons. Muriel's in a very conventional relationship and building a life with Lee, and Julius is, uh, you know, uh, lives on the road literally, and is a card sharp and a hustler, and lives by his wits, and but they're both aspects, I think, of this American ideal of aspiration. You know, Muriel and Lee are aspiring to having children and having, you know, they get a car, they have a house, they have appliances, they have, you know, these very conventional kind of community that they're moving into that hasn't, you know, that obviously over time would have developed. And Julius is in Las Vegas, which is another kind of American dream, another kind of aspiration where you can, over the course of a few hands of cards, change the course of your life. So that's sort of how I see it.
And so, one last question for you, and this is a broad one. It's for your favorite piece of LGBTQ plus culture. So it could be a book, a film, theatre, music, art, photography, any piece of culture, or a person who identifies as LGBTQ plus. So just someone or something that's had a big impact on you, resonated with you over the years, and why.
Interesting. The first thing that comes to mind is Bowie, but you know, he's sort of in a class of his own, but was a huge influence on me as a young gay kid growing up in the suburbs. Excuse me, kind of promising like uh, a different kind of life was that existed somewhere else, that it was magical and where you could transform and, you know, be whatever you wanted to be.